Hello and welcome to another edition of Proselytize or Apostatize. I'm your host, David Russell, along with my co-host.
David Paulman. Good to be back with another episode, Russell.
Yeah, it's good, man. We have an awesome show for our fans today. So I'm going to let you take it over from there because I worked all day and I just ate some of God's chicken. So go for it, my friend.
All right. Yeah, I know we got a special guest on with us today, Scott Cherry. He's a good friend, and we're going to be hearing about how to witness to Muslims, how to share our faith with them, and to just be more effective apologists in that regard. I've known Mr. Cherry for about a year and a half now. I met him actually through his book that he wrote here, The Reason of Reason. The link for that will be down in the description if you want to get that. It's a argument for the existence of God based on reason, logic, and intelligibility. And in the book, he had this he gave an opportunity for the readers to contact him through email. And so, I did that and then got to know him that way, and just really impressed with how, intelligent he was. And then learned that he's actually, he has a ministry to Muslims. And so I thought, we should have him on the show, and to interview him on that. So good to have you on the show, Scott.
Great to be with you.
Yep. Scott is a co-founder and executive minister for Advanced Ministries for 16 years. His mission is to advance the gospel in Dearborn, Detroit, especially at the three local universities such as Dearborn, using sound theology and relational apologetics. There he launched a student organization called Faith and Reason. Scott and his wife have lived in the same East Dearborn home for 23 years in a wonderful old ethnic neighborhood with very nice Muslim neighbors. They raised their two now adult children there. Scott was originally an elementary school teacher and worked in that field until he started a small home improvement business. He has an MA in applied linguistics, but is far more interested in theology, philosophy, apologetics, and evangelism. In addition to outreach in the community, Scott preaches in churches and delivers lectures and seminars on related subjects and provides training for Christians to engage people with the gospel. He and partners also launched a thought-provoking website, and I know I'm going to butcher the name on this, but I think it's pronounced Tao and Tawhid. And you can say that correct.
You got it,
Scott. I got it. All right. We'll have the link for that in the description as well. And there, contains their personal writings on philosophy, theology, biblical studies, and politics, all from a Christian perspective. Whoa, that was a long bio, Scott.
I chopped it in half too.
Look at that. No, it's great to have you on with us. So, I think we're just going to dive right into the interview here. In this first part here, just kind of give us your presentation for how we can witness to Muslims, maybe how you do it, and some practical tips there.
Well, really, I think I'll talk about how to witness to everybody, and Muslims are included, but also Hindus and agnostics and all sorts of people. There's just some core principles. You have to know your Bible. You have to be able to quote scripture or talk about it intelligently. Number one, you have to be passionate about the gospel. You have to love to talk about the plan of salvation. That has to show. That has to be evident in your eyes. There should be a twinkle, and a bounce in your step. People, Muslims, Buddhists, whoever, should know that you get excited about the message of the gospel. You should be relational. You should laugh. You should have a sense of humor. You should respond to humor. You should not come off as too self-absorbed, of course, but you should be friendly, and you should also be intelligent. Okay. Now, some amount of intelligence is necessary for being an effective evangelist, no matter who you're talking about. You don't have to be a genius, but you do have to be able to talk about logical propositions, okay, and to lay out the premises of the message of the gospel. There are a certain number of premises, and if you just choose the fundamental ones, you can just lay it out. It's very systematic, and so there is a system to the Christian set of beliefs. We call it a belief system. Every religion has its own system. We have to be able to explain that, and so explaining your belief system and why someone else should believe that is one of the core apologetics. Okay, you also should be able to display love, so people feel like you care about them. And of course, if it's not just a one-off conversation, that gets easier. You can build on that initial conversation, and you can have another one the next time. At the university, I see students again and again and again in all different places and in all different situations. And that's how it is with our neighbors. And if your students out there, that's how it is for you too. There's many places where you can re-encounter someone, and all those are ingredients. Now, with Muslim people, well, they're people, okay? So in a lot of ways, all of those principles and ideals that I just described apply equally well to Muslims. Then there are, of course, some specific details that the Christian needs to apply himself or herself to. So Islam is a religion that has all of its own particulars, its own history, its own propositions, and then there are not only the ones on the surface, but then there are ones under the surface. Well, the Christian has to learn those. Now, let's say you know nothing about Islam or Muslims. Well, then just apply all the principles that I laid out for you already. Explain the gospel as well as you can. Then ask questions. Now, in some cases, the Muslim person is not going to wait for you to say, do you have any questions? Do you understand? They're going to interject their own questions and their own objections about what they believe and what they don't believe. Okay, so that makes it easy in some ways, especially if they do that moderately aggressively or not at all aggressively. But there is sometimes a person has a level of aggression or hostility that comes out when they object to something you say they should believe. And a good evangelist has to know how to diffuse that. Okay, and all of that's if you don't know anything about Islam. But if you have any intention of having intelligent and purposeful conversations with Muslims, then, like you would with Buddhists or nominal Christians, perhaps, you should learn what the Quran says. What are the core beliefs of Muslims? And, you start with, again, the big rocks, and then you give attention to the smaller and smaller rocks. But either way, nobody knows everything about any subject. So I don't know anything about, well, there's plenty of subjects I don't know anything about, but I don't know everything about Islam, even though, my neighbors are all Muslims and I talk to Muslims so often. I have to ask them, what do you believe? Last night I was at the park talking to two Muslims, and one Muslim was actually saying to me that he believes Jesus died on the cross. Well, if you know anything about Islam, you should know that most Muslims don't believe that. So I was surprised. Then I asked his friend, well, do you believe that Jesus died on the cross? He said, absolutely not. And that was far more of a standard answer. How's that for the short answer?
I think that was good. Yeah, I like that. Some practical tips there, and I especially like that you drew it back to it's like there's some basic tips for witnessing to anyone, and to be knowledgeable on topics like that. So we got some specific questions here that I would want to ask, and so Russell, if you don't have anything, then I'm going to move into that.
No, go ahead, David.
All right, so what about the Trinity? Because that comes up a lot, not just with Muslims, but with critics or skeptics of Christianity in general. Some objections, especially to the coherence of it, I think is what we get a lot from Muslims. So how would you maybe explain it? And if you want to go a little deeper, even how to defend it?
Okay, sure. Let me paint a little picture. And I started it already. I mentioned that I was at a park last night. Two of my friends and I went to this park for the purpose of talking to people. We set up a book table with lots of good Christian books, intellectual apologetics books, and some not so intellectual. But we had some Bibles and some different literature. And this is one of my favorite ways of drawing people into conversation. It just so happens that at this park, there are lots and lots of Muslim people, very few non-Muslims. And there we were sitting behind our table, watching people go by on the walking track. And I mentioned two older gentlemen that I spoke to for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. But before that, and after those two guys, there were some younger Muslim young men that wanted to know about the Trinity. So the Trinity comes up in almost every intelligent conversation with a Muslim person. It just does. It's a huge subject. Maybe you knew that because that's the first question you asked me past the overview question. All Muslims choke on the idea of the Trinity. I mean, they object to it. It doesn't make sense to them, and Christians have to be able to explain it reasonably well. One problem is that a lot of Christians cannot explain it very well, and it is harder to explain than the Muslim idea. The Muslim only has to say God is one. There is only one God, and He is one. That means that He has no partners, no associates, no divisions. He has no children, was never married, and therefore, for a Muslim, it's easy to explain what God is. He's just one, and then he can talk about what God isn't. Christian has to say, yes, God is one, but he has three persons. So he's not an absolute one like Muslims believe he is. But in this conversation at the park last night, I believe now I'm thinking of the very last conversation before we shut down the table. There were three young Muslim guys, very nice guys, very intelligent, very friendly, not at all aggressive, and they seem to sincerely want to understand Christianity. And within a limited time, I think they gave us about 15 minutes to talk with them. So there were three of them and three of us, and they wanted to know, what is the Trinity? Why do Christians believe the Trinity? And that's, by the way, its own question. Why do we believe the Trinity? We can just say, look, that's what we discover when we read the Bible. We didn't invent the Trinity. If we were going to invent a doctrine about God, we would invent something simpler, something easier to explain. And I wrote about that in my book. Actually, I added a whole lot of material to that, David, and now there's a whole lot more about the Trinity. It turns out that the last couple of chapters of the Reason of Reason are very focused on the Trinity, the Christian God, the biblical God. So one way to explain the Trinity is that God is not an absolute one, because there is no such thing as an absolute one. I said to these guys, look around. Think of any object. Think of a person. Think of this park. Everything you call this park, this person, everything you would say is a one. If you touch a tree like the one next to me and say this is one tree, single example is a composite of something, of other things. Even the human being is a sure. Every human being is one being, but every person has multiple aspects to their personality, but also to their being. Depending on which ones you admit to. So everyone has a mind. That one's an easy one. Then everyone has some kind of a soul or a spirit. You have a body, and then each of those things is comprised of other things. So there is no such thing as an absolute one. Why should we expect God to be an absolute one? And if he were, so for example, if he were such a being that he had absolutely no diversity within him, no plurality at all, well, then how could he create diversity in the world? How could he create colors and flavors and different species of trees and so many billions of kinds of organisms? It would be impossible for such a monolithic being as an absolute one to produce such an enormous amount of variety and diversity and plurality in the world. So that's a philosophical answer. And there are other kinds of answers, but let me give you some airtime.
No, I think that was good, especially drawing out that I think a lot of the problem is that people just don't know how to explain the Trinity well. I certainly know that, like, before I started studying systematic theology and such, I couldn't explain it well either, and I don't think we really explain it to people in our churches and stuff that well a lot of the time. So that is part of the problem. So I like that you draw that out. Also, that it's not something we make up; it's something that we discover from Scripture. So those were very good points there. How about this? What should we do? Because I have Muslims ask me this a lot, like in these exact words too. I get asked a lot. Where did Jesus say, "I am God, worship me"? And like, I'll give them some like usual proof text for the deity of Christ, but they're like, no. It's got to say, "I am God, worship me." Why is it that they want those exact words? And then how do you respond to that question?
And it's not only Muslims that ask that question, by the way, but yes, Muslims are fond of that question. Why? Because there is no such example, such a clear-cut, precise statement in the New Testament in which Jesus just says, "I am God, worship me," in those exact words. And so what happens there is that the Muslim person, now he may be very sincere. He may sincerely want to know the answer to that question, because after all, if we had that kind of statement from Jesus, that would put that question right. The reason why people ask that question over and over again, that kind of statement is not there. So the Christian has to be able to know, right, that statement is not there, but Jesus said that he is God or that he is divine in a hundred other even more powerful ways. But one principle here is that we don't have to allow our conversation partner to set the terms. Okay. When let's talk about someone perhaps who is not so sincere, and someone who knows that that's a tool that he can use or that she can use to undermine your platform of belief. Okay, so it's a test, let's say. um, in that case, they're quite possibly trying to set the terms or to drive the conversation in a way that makes it more difficult for you, and might make you feel like you're being backed into a corner, into a place where it's difficult to defend, especially if that person now asks you multiple other questions on top of that one without even giving you time to answer the first one. This is also a strategy that the more aggressive types of people or Muslims can use against Christians by stacking the questions. But if you were a Muslim and I were answering that question, I would say, well, that's a good question. It really is a good. After all, if we say that Jesus was God or that he was divine, or he was the Son of God, we should be able to point to the things that he said and did that give us that belief. Okay, so I would say to you, let's say you're Mustafa. Mustafa, that is a great question. Okay, and after all, that's the kind of a question that gives you reason not to believe that about Muhammad. After all, yeah, Muhammad very clearly said that he wasn't a god and that he wasn't divine and that he doesn't merit any worship, and that's clearly why um, Muhammad is not your God. But yeah, for us, Jesus is. Why? He said things that only God should say. No, he did not say those exact words, but it's unreasonable for you to demand that I produce those exact words. I'm not going to I'm telling you right now, Mustafa, I'm not going to produce those exact words, but it's not necessary for me to do that while also asking you to consider the claims of Christ. Because when he said, that when you have seen me, you have seen the Father, that's a claim to divinity. When he says that I and the Father are one, that's a claim to divinity. When he forgives people's sins, like when he said to the paralytic man, I have authority to forgive sins. That's a claim to divinity. Now, many things that Jesus said were subtle or they were indirect. Jesus had to be concerned about how to sustain the longevity of his ministry by saying the most direct and the boldest types of things right up front. It allows your enemies to pin you down quicker. So also by saying things in a veiled manner, in a more implied manner many of the times. He put the evidence of truth out there for his listeners, to those who had what he said were eyes to see and ears to hear, those who had a heart to receive the true message, even if it were the subtext. But make no mistake, Jesus did claim to be divine, and he also did receive worship. It's true that he didn't go around telling people to worship me, but he always received worship from people when they wanted to worship him, and there are a half a dozen instances of that.
Very good, very good. Yeah, and I think it was good that you bring up that sometimes questions can just be an excuse to put people in an awkward situation. So, it's not that there's not necessarily an answer, but sometimes the answer is going to be a little more complicated, or you're going to have to address an assumption that the question rests on, and so it'll look like you're not answering the question. So I have noticed that tactic. The other thing that, at least I think on that, and maybe you would agree with this, is that you can also ask them, where does Jesus say that I'm just a prophet, don't worship me? And, they won't be able to find those exact words either, just to kind of illustrate that we have to move beyond that exact word criteria and look at the implications of what he says.
Exactly. Well put.
So here's one other thing. While we are on the topic of asking questions, obviously, we don't want to ask questions just to put people in awkward situations, but maybe what are some good questions that we could ask Muslims to make them think, just kind of about maybe the coherence or the justification or something like that of some of the claims of Islam, or maybe their challenges to Christianity. What are maybe some questions that we could ask them?
Yeah, and again, the first example I'm going to give you is one that you can ask everybody. Remember, there's such a crossover of good questions that anybody you're talking to should be asked to consider. And that is, what do you expect in eternity, Mustafa? When you come to the end of your, you do believe you're going to die, don't you? Yes. Okay. Well, when you do, what's after that? Okay. And then you can listen. Okay. Listen to the Muslim person or whoever you're talking to. Explain what they expect to be in the afterlife. And what's interesting about Muslims is that 99% of them say they're not sure what happens after that. Now, what I mean is this. It's not that they're not sure what the options are. They do believe very firmly there are two options. They're the same options that Christians have. There's heaven and there's hell. Sometimes there's other aspects to that too, and Christians have it too, like is there a soul sleep, or is there, an Abraham's bosom or whatever. Muslims believe in heaven and hell, but almost no Muslims believe that they know what their destiny is, where they're going to be assigned, whether to heaven or hell. And that, at first, that sounds a little bit almost like when you're talking to Catholic people. Many Catholic people have said to me, I don't know, it all depends on my works. Well, that's exactly what the Muslim means. It all depends on my works. They have a scale very similar to many American people have. In the end, if your good works outweigh your bad works, and probably should be expected to assign you to heaven, to give you entrance into, eternal paradise. If your bad works outweigh your good works, then you can be expected to go to hell. And then there are, subtleties involved in that too. For example, a lot of Muslims around here anyway, believe in a purgatory. So it's similar to, again, a Catholic belief system. Did you know that? They don't call it a purgatory, but it functions exactly like purgatory. So actually, that gives Muslims a kind of relief, because it seems to me, that many Muslims believe that they deserve to go to hell, and they will. But thankfully, it's not permanent. They, will have all their sins burned out, and they will suffer, and they'll be allowed to enter into heaven. And both Shiites and Sunnis seem to believe that. But the question of eternal destiny is a super great question, and then you can say, "Would you like to know what I believe?" And that's a great question. Would you like to know what I believe? Many Muslims will not ask you what you believe, and other people too. Uh, they'll just tell you what they believe, because that's all that matters to them. And so you can interject that. Do you mind if I explain to you what the Bible teaches about heaven and hell? So there's a similarity, but there's this radical difference, especially with the evangelical Protestant point of view on heaven and hell, that we aren't saved by works. We're saved by grace through faith. And that's not of ourselves. We, if left to ourselves, yeah, we would go to hell. Our bad deeds will always outweigh our good deeds, even if that matters. And it's kind of funny and interesting to actually admit to a Muslim, look, Mustafa, I deserve to go to hell. If left to myself, and if there were no special, arrangements, I would go to hell. And I'm not even the worst kind of person. Okay? But I deserve to go to hell. Do you want me to tell you some of the sinful things I've done in my past? And then sometimes they'll say, yeah, tell me that. And then you can actually ask that. Tell me some of the sinful things that you've done. Okay? But it's not unusual for a Muslim person to believe that he actually deserves to go to hell. And that's a great discussion. But another good discussion point is about what kind of relationship do you have with Allah? And you can dig into that, the nature of the relationship that they believe they can have and expect to have with Allah. And so we were talking a little bit earlier about the nature of oneness. It's very, very interesting to get into the mind of a Muslim person about their view of God. In America, what started to become evident is that their view of Allah has acquired a lot sort of rubbed off. But in actual fact, Orthodox Muslims don't believe that you can have a relationship with Allah, and you shouldn't expect to, because he's distant, he's detached. Even though they might quote you this saying, this proverb that God is closer than your jugular vein, that means almost nothing. They say this, but it means almost nothing after you brush it aside. So if you meet Muslims that say they have a relationship with God, and they believe that's important, and that love is important in that relationship, then you should understand that has come from Christianity, that has rubbed off from Christianity onto their concept of God. So those are just two examples.
Yeah, very good, very good. How about this then? What maybe would be our strongest argument that we could make against Islam, or maybe it could be an argument for Christianity? But what would you say is like the strongest point that we could make?
It's Jesus. The end. No, it's Jesus. It has to be all about Christ. Okay, the central figure of the gospel message is Jesus Christ. Jesus is our whole reason for boasting, and for salvation, and for hope, eternal life, and for hope in this world. Jesus Christ is preeminent. He is he is matchless. Okay, and so what we have to do is, the song says, that we have to make much of Jesus. We have to talk about how incredibly compassionate he was, far more compassionate than than Muhammad and the prophets of other religions. He was the exemplar of humanitarianism. He was the supreme example of going to the downtrodden, the oppressed, the marginalized, the rejected. There's simply no one that has ever been like him, and who has the powers that he has. Now I'm tipping my hat to my friend Tom Gilson. If you participate in the CAA Facebook group, you might see Tom Gilson, who has created an argument, or maybe he borrowed it, like many things, and has personalized it. Now has written a book that's about to be published. That Jesus represents the only person in all of human history who claimed to have supreme power and who was supremely selfless. Okay? Because usually someone who has supreme power, who can cast out any demons, can walk on water and command nature, look, they get what they want. They abuse their power. They exploit people to get fame and fortune and riches. And that's exactly what the devil tried to do to Jesus in the temptation. He tried to exploit Jesus and leverage Jesus's power against him to get him to want to become a rich despot, like so many other powerful people have become, and with very few exceptions. Jesus could have been, the richest, most powerful despot or tyrant, okay, like Nebuchadnezzar or the Pharaoh of Egypt. But rather, Jesus, without abandoning his powers by any means, subdued his powers in order to bring hope and compassion to regular human beings, and then to give them a reason to want to be righteous, to want to be reconciled to a holy God, and then to provide the means. The means are something that no one else has ever done. He gave himself to die on the cross. He embraced the suffering and the shame of the cross in order to do something for people that they had no hope of doing for themselves. Muhammad never did any of those kinds of things, and neither did the Buddha or Joseph Smith. No, Jesus is on a plane all his own. And then he proved his entire agenda by the resurrection from the dead. Because he gave it all up in the death that he suffered on the cross, only to regain that by the resurrection 3 days later, and then still not exploit that, not because after that, for sure, what he could have done was to go around showing himself, displaying himself, with pomp and circumstance. Look at me, I've risen from the dead, you know, but rather he was very, very veiled and discreet about his appearances, so that only really those who loved him and embraced him and worshiped him already could have the full confidence of his deity and of his mission to bring salvation lost.
Always bringing it back to Jesus, and that's
Amen. That's how we have to.
all about that.
Yeah, I had a
Right.
question. Who was Jesus to the Muslims? Is he a sinless prophet? A lot of you guys don't know this, but I used to work security for the Islamic Saudi Academy, and it was really interesting running those halls and looking at who they thought Jesus was. And I always noticed there was that sinless prophet. And is that a true depiction?
Yes, it is. And that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that question because it takes us into, some of the particular beliefs of Muslim people. You might run into a Muslim someday who says Muslims love Jesus more than Christians, more than you do. And it's interesting. I just had somebody say that to me last week. And so they will say they have this high esteem for Jesus, but they choose their words very carefully. Assume that they really do have a high esteem for Jesus. Well, what that means is, they believe Jesus was a great prophet, he was one of the 5 greatest prophets. When you pick into the details, they believe Jesus did all the miracles that the New Testament ascribes to him, although they're not described in particular details. They're just stated. They believe that Jesus had a special mission to the Jewish people. He had special powers. And he was very unique among the prophets. And yet, he was just a prophet, and he was no better than any of the other prophets. And he's certainly, he's not the Son of God. He is not divine in any sense. He is a man with a mission, like Moses and like Abraham and like Noah and like David and like Muhammad. And so you don't worship Jesus. And also, he didn't die on the cross. Why? Because Jesus would never accept that, and God would never he would never condemn such a great prophet to a horrendous death and shame like that. So that's the logic behind that. But the Quran also actually says they did not crucify him, neither did he die, in Surah chapter. Very explicit statement, although there's still there's wiggle room in that statement, because there's different questions that arise from statement. But naturally, if he didn't die on the cross, then he couldn't rise from the dead. And so what in reality, in practice, and in belief, Muhammad is the best prophet. He's the highest prophet by virtue of being the last prophet. So that's huge. That's a conversation point with the Muslim. I was sitting with a Muslim student one time at the university center. His name was Abdullah. He asked me this question: why don't you believe in Islam? And that's a great question. Now, very few Muslims ask such a pointed question. He wanted me to give him a list of reasons why I do not espouse Islam and become a Muslim. One of them is, hey, what if I showed you, Abdullah, that Jesus made statements to the effect that there could be no more prophets after him? That if Jesus were the last prophet, in fact, that's what we do get from Jesus. He warned us of false prophets that would come after him, and we can find examples of that to the effect that, yeah, when Jesus finished his mission, that was the end of the prophets. So there's no room for another one after him. Yeah, that's more than you asked, but I think I did answer it.
Oh yeah, that was good. Thanks for asking that, Russell. So yeah, here was a question that I had. Maybe what are some things not to do? And I'm thinking maybe popular tactics. You know, you can answer that however you want, but I'm thinking maybe popular tactics that are used in arguing against Islam, or topics to bring up, or maybe things that just don't really go anywhere. But maybe what are some things that we shouldn't do when we're discussing our faith with Muslims?
That's a question that to which the answer does not immediately come to my mind, because I tend to be someone who wants to try everything. I love to recite this maxim that someone put out to us in a conference once. He said, "Nothing works. Try everything." And I think that applies to all types of evangelism. No matter who you're talking to. I think you do have to be creative. You do have to be responsive to that person. You do have to care about that person, and not just about apologetics. Not just about winning, because even if you win, you don't win if that person just walks away and he doesn't believe any better. But I will say, I think it's wise, assuming the best of that person, assuming that they're sincere, assuming that they don't have all the objections memorized. Okay, now you can pick up on those things really quickly in a conversation with a Muslim person or any person. You can start to pick up on what their objections are, and whether they're rehearsed objections, and whether they've tested them on other people. But I like to assume of my Muslim friends that they really are interested in God. They do want to know God if possible. There's a yearning. In other words, there's a yearning to be on good terms with God, and there's a yearning for intimacy. So to gain that intimacy, and to truly understand God's will and God's heart for humanity. And I like to assume, okay, so I don't like to start by them of any kind of false motives or pretenses. I don't want to stereotype the Muslim person I'm talking to, and lump him together with a broader type of more militant or radical profile of Muslims that for some American Christians in some places where they don't know any Muslims personally, the only Muslims they know anything about are the ones they see in the media. Okay, so Christians by the way, this is a side note. Christians should want to meet Muslims, and if they find out that there are any Muslims in their town, and even in their part of town, they should be intentional about finding them and about interacting with them. Okay, but in the beginning, I don't want to say anything negative about Muhammad if I can help it, and actually I can help it. I can avoid saying anything negative about their whole religion and their whole belief system for a long time. Okay, so it's only if the conversation goes a certain way that negative things might need to come out, accidentally come out. And now I'm thinking of another conversation that I had, just last night at the park, because a young lady approached the table, a Muslim young lady who was aggressive from the very beginning, and she was upset that we had a book about jihad on the table. It was called Answering Jihad by Nabil Qureshi, who passed away a couple of years ago. But she took notice of that, and then the whole conversation was difficult. This just messy and tense and very undesirable. But I would never have assumed that about her. If it hadn't been for that, I would have approached her as a sincere person who wants to know God, who wants to love God, and who is interested in Christianity, who wants to, and I think this is true about many Muslims. They want to understand Christianity, and I think that's the best assumption. That look, the fact is, almost all Muslims are Muslims because they were born that way. Okay. Now they may have later an experience that builds their confidence and gives them an intelligent affirmation of their belief system. But hey, they didn't choose it from day one. It was forced on them from birth. Okay. So, by the same token, most Muslims don't born again Christians, real, genuine followers of Jesus Christ, like you and me. Most Muslims, so therefore, only know nominal Christians or false Christians or none. And there are hundreds and thousands of Muslims who also yearn to meet true, sincere Christians who have a living and vibrant faith, who can sit and explain and talk about and discuss what the Bible actually says, and then open it to them and read them parts of it, and flip through it and show them and ask them to read. So I believe in micro Bible studies. I believe that when you're in a conversation with somebody, it should almost every time should become a Bible study, even a little one, because there's almost no conversation that doesn't have room for a story from the Bible, from a parable or from an event when Jesus healed somebody. And so there's an enormous amount of potential by assuming that Muslims, if they're exposed to the true content of the Bible, especially the New Testament, they will want to believe it.
Very good, very good. So that was the last question that I had on here. Russell, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
No, he answered my sinless prophet question. So.
Okay. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, Scott. Remember his book, The Reason of Reason. The link for that will be down in the description below. I definitely recommend checking it out. An argument for the existence of God from reason, logic, and intelligibility. So it's a fascinating read. And that's in its 4th edition or almost in its 4th edition?
Yeah, it is in its 4th edition. It has a different cover now. It has extra chapters now. So, yeah, to you and to my friend, both Davids.
All right.
Yeah.
Do we have any announcements to make, Russell?
Yes, we are actually going to be back soon to expect another response video. We're doing David's favorite since he had to kind of bash one of my favorite atheists, the godless engineer. So we are actually going to respond to one of his videos, but we're only going to respond to the first 5 minutes because that's enough material right there. We've also got my friend and local apologist in my area, in the Fredericksburg, Virginia, Northern Virginia area, Rob Lumberg, will be on with us. And Rob is an apologist that he does a lot of work. And I'll be introducing him tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about how America has lost its evangelical mind. So that's going to be our interview for tomorrow. And that's only going to be like a 20 minutes. He does want to stay on the line with us to answer, to be part of the response video, which me and David didn't expect our guests to be on for the response videos, which is cool, and I enjoy it. So yeah, stay tuned. Keep looking back at our YouTube channel. Subscribe, and we'll see you at the next response video.
Yeah, and on that note, then I just would say, yeah, we are doing response videos now. It's a new thing. PORA Raw is what we're calling that series. It's still going to be on this channel, but yeah, any videos you want us to do a response to, drop it in the description of the video with the link to the video, and we'll check it out, and we may just do a response to it.
Yep, and also excuse us as we get started with these response videos because we had some technical issues last time, and we are trying to work through those. So we are going to get better at it, we promise. So just enjoy it and have fun with it. We good?